the boy with big eyes. From the moment Dare opened his eyes to the world, people stared. His eyes were unusually large, not just a little bigger than other children's, but large enough to draw attention in every room, on every path, and in every corner of the village. Some saw it and laughed, whispering behind their palms as they walked past. His mother's little shop by the roadside. Others were a face of pity, shaking their heads as if he were some kind of mistake that life had cruelly printed. Dare's father couldn't take the shame. He left when Dare was barely 2 years old, walking out without a single look back. The neighbors said he couldn't bear raising a child who looked like something out of a strange dream. Dare's mother, Mama Tinu, ignored them all. She held her child close, tighter than most mothers would, praying every night that one day the world would see the boy beyond his looks. As Dare grew, so did his eyes. But it wasn't just his face that grew, it was the silence that followed him. The isolation, the cold shoulder from his classmates. At school, he sat alone. During lunch breaks, while the other children played football or skipped rope, Dare would sit under the mango tree at the edge of the school compound, watching them from a distance. No one passed him the ball. No one invited him to play. Still, Mama Tinu encouraged him. One day, she would say with hope shining in her tired eyes, "Your life will change, Dare. It only takes one moment. One person." But in Dare's mind, that person would never come. How could they? When even his teachers struggled to call his name without looking uncomfortable, he had learned to accept being invisible. It was a Tuesday morning when something unusual happened at Dare's school. The headmistress had gathered all the students on the assembly ground, her tone unusually cheerful as she announced that a team of white doctors from abroad would be visiting for a free medical outreach. The children murmured excitedly. Some had never seen a white person before, and others looked forward to getting sweets or stickers, as they had heard from other villages. Dare, however, felt dread crawling over his skin. He had learned early on that strangers meant new eyes to stare, new laughter to echo in his ears, and new words to cut through the little confidence he had left. That morning, instead of joining the rest of the students, he hid inside one of the old classrooms at the back of the school. It was dusty and dark, but at least it was quiet. From there, he peeked through a broken window, watching the white men in blue medical jackets set up their equipment. Rows of pupils lined up, barefoot and giggling, as the doctors checked their teeth, ears, and eyes. Laughter echoed as one of the nurses used a cold stethoscope on a chubby boy, who shrieked in surprise. But all Dare could feel was fear. He didn't want to be laughed at again. He didn't want to see the mocking look on yet another stranger's face. So he stayed hidden, holding his knees close, wishing he could become so small he'd disappear. Just as the doctors began packing up, one of them looked around and asked, "Is this everyone?" A teacher, without thinking twice, shrugged and said, "There's one more. But he's not important." Dare heard those words, and though he was used to being overlooked, something about hearing that from a teacher, someone who was supposed to protect him, stung deeper than he expected. Dr. Lewis, the lead doctor of the outreach team, paused when he heard the teacher's words. His brows furrowed. "Not important," he repeated, as if the phrase offended him. "Every child is important. Please, bring him." The teacher hesitated for a second, glancing nervously at the other staff members. Then she reluctantly turned and walked toward the back of the school. "Dare," she called out, her voice half-hearted. "Come out. The doctor wants to see you." Inside the dusty classroom, Dare froze. His heart pounded as the footsteps approached. Slowly, he stood up from his hiding place. He didn't want to go, but something about the doctor's voice, firm, yet kind, stuck in his head. So, with hesitant steps, he emerged from the shadows. As he walked toward the medical tent, students turned and stared. A hush fell over the group. Some of the younger ones snickered. Others whispered. But Dr. Lewis didn't laugh. Instead, his eyes softened as he looked at Dare, really looked at him. "What's your name?" the doctor asked gently. "Dare," the boy replied, barely audible. Dr. Lewis knelt to Dare's level and looked closely into his large, expressive eyes. He asked him a few questions, if he felt pain, if his vision was clear, how long he had looked this way. Dare answered slowly, unsure of how much to reveal. But Dr. Lewis nodded thoughtfully after each answer, his face unreadable. Then he turned to the other doctors and whispered something. One of them nodded. "Would it be all right if I visited your home?" Dr. Lewis asked. Dare blinked, surprised. Why? I want to speak with your mother. For the first time in a long while, Dare felt something new stir in his chest, curiosity, and maybe, just maybe, hope. The walk home from school that day felt different for Dare. He wasn't walking alone. Dr. Lewis was right beside him, carrying a small leather bag, asking gentle questions about his daily life. At first, Dare didn't say much, but there was something about the man's tone that made him feel safe, even seen. So he opened up, slowly, about his mother, about school, about how the other children treated him. When they arrived at the small mud brick house nestled at the edge of the village, Mama Tinu came rushing out, confused and cautious at the sight of a strange white man following her son. "Good afternoon, Ma," Dr. Lewis greeted with a smile, extending his hand. "My name is Dr. Lewis. May I come in?" Inside the small room, Mama Tinu offered him the only chair they had. She sat on a wooden stool while Dare stood silently near the doorway, watching. "I saw your son today," Dr. Lewis began. "I noticed something unusual about his eyes." Mama Tinu sighed deeply and nodded. "Yes, doctor. He was born like that. We have no money to check what is wrong. His father couldn't stay. People said terrible things. But he is my child. I love him the way he is." Dr. Lewis nodded slowly, visibly moved. "I want to help. I think we may be able to correct his condition, perhaps even restore his appearance completely." Mama Tinu's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you serious, sir?" "Yes," he replied. "It won't be easy, and he'll need to travel with me for treatment. But I'll cover everything." Mama Tinu clutched her chest. God bless you." Dare stood frozen. He wasn't sure what he felt. Was it joy? Was it fear? Maybe both. But deep inside, a seed of possibility had just been planted, and it was beginning to grow. News travels fast in a small village, faster than wind, faster than footsteps. By the next morning, almost everyone had heard that a white doctor had visited Mama Tinu's house to talk about Dare. Some scoffed. Others speculated. The market women gossiped as they plucked vegetables. "What kind of surgery can fix such eyes?" One asked. "Maybe he's taking the boy abroad." Another chimed in, half joking. A few hoped the rumors were true. Most simply waited to see what would happen. Dare returned to school the following day. And though nothing had changed physically, the way people looked at him had shifted. They didn't call him names anymore, but they didn't exactly speak to him either. It was like he had become a walking question mark. Some children eyed him with curiosity, others with envy. The teachers, too, had become strangely polite. Even the one who called him not important now smiled awkwardly when she saw him. But inside, Dare still battled with doubt. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was all too good to be true. What if the doctor forgot? What if something went wrong? At night, he would stare at the ceiling of their tiny room, wondering if people like him were even allowed to hope for miracles. Mama Tinu, on the other hand, clung tightly to faith. Every evening, she lit a small oil lamp, knelt down by her son, and prayed. "Lord, let this be the open door we've waited for," she whispered, hands trembling. Weeks passed, then a month. No sign of the doctor. Whispers began again. Maybe he changed his mind. Maybe it was just pity. But just when doubt was beginning to win, a loud knock came on their door one Saturday morning. And standing there, with a warm smile and a travel bag, was Dr. Lewis. Dr. Lewis stood at the doorway, dressed in casual clothes and wearing a kind smile. In his hand was a small file and a printed letter with hospital stamps. "I told you I would come back," he said, looking at Mama Tinu, then at Dare, who stood barefoot behind her with wide, trembling eyes. Mama Tinu's voice broke as she responded. "You really came? God bless you, doctor." Inside, Dr. Lewis explained everything again, this time with details. Dare would travel with him to the city first, where a team of specialists would run more scans. From there, if everything went well, he'd be flown abroad for surgery. It sounded like something out of a dream. Mama Tinu wiped her eyes repeatedly, her hands shaking as she signed the consent forms. Dare didn't say much. He was overwhelmed. Somewhere deep inside, he had always believed his life would remain the same, that people would always laugh, that his eyes would always betray him. But here was a man, a stranger from another land, promising a second chance. The next few days were a blur. A travel bag was packed. Some of the villagers gathered outside to see them off. One woman even offered a new shirt for Dare to wear, though some still mumbled with doubt. Most stood in awe as a white SUV arrived, and Dare stepped into it beside Dr. Lewis. As the vehicle pulled away, Mama Tinu stood waving, tears flowing freely. "Go, my son," she whispered. "Let the world see who you truly are." In the car, Dare looked back until the village disappeared. He didn't know what lay ahead. The machines, the foreign land, the surgery, it all frightened him. But he was also ready. For once, the road in front of him didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a way out. The city was nothing like Dare had ever imagined. The noise, the tall buildings, the endless cars, it was overwhelming. At first, he clung tightly to Dr. Lewis like a frightened child. But Dr. Lewis was patient. He explained everything along the way, pointing at buildings, answering Dare's endless questions, and making sure he never felt alone. At the hospital, they were received by a team of friendly nurses and specialists. Dare's eyes widened as he walked into the waiting room. Everything was white, clean, and bright. There were toys and books in the children's lounge, and a cartoon played on a flat-screen TV. It felt like another world. For the first time, no one stared at him with judgment. The doctors didn't flinch when they looked at his face. They simply asked questions, took notes, and smiled kindly. He underwent a series of scans and examinations. Some machines buzzed, some beeped. He felt like a science project at times, but he was never treated like one. Every doctor took the time to reassure him. Dr. Lewis was always by his side, explaining what each test was for and reminding him that everything would be okay. One afternoon, Dr. Lewis sat with him in the hospital room. "Dare," he said gently, "your condition is called congenital macroblepharon. It affects the size and function of your eyelids and surrounding muscles. But the good news is, it's operable. With the right surgery, we can make a huge difference. Are you ready?" Dare nodded slowly. He didn't fully understand the long medical terms, but he understood the heart behind the words. Someone believed in him. Someone wanted to help. That night, as he lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling, he whispered softly, "Mama was right. One moment can change everything." The morning of the surgery came faster than Dare expected. Nurses entered his room at sunrise, speaking softly and preparing him for the big moment. His heart thudded loudly in his chest. He wasn't in pain, but he was afraid. Afraid of the unknown. Afraid that the surgery might not work. What if he woke up looking the same? Or worse? Dr. Lewis walked in, dressed in scrubs, a mask hanging loose around his neck. He placed a hand on Dare's shoulder. "You're brave," he said. "Braver than most grown men I know. Just close your eyes and sleep. When you wake up, you'll be starting a new chapter." Dare nodded slowly as he was wheeled into the operating theater. The bright lights overhead almost blinded him. Machines beeped softly in the background. A kind-looking female anesthetist smiled down at him. "Just breathe," she whispered, placing a mask over his nose. "You're going to be okay." As the medicine flowed through his veins, Dare's eyes closed. The world faded into darkness. The surgery lasted several hours. A team of highly trained surgeons worked carefully on the delicate muscles around his eyes, reshaping the eyelids, adjusting tissues, and reconstructing areas to give his face a natural, proportional look. It was complex, meticulous work, but not impossible. Outside, Dr. Lewis waited anxiously, pacing the hallway. Though he had full faith in the surgical team, he couldn't help but feel protective of the boy who had come to mean so much to him. Dare wasn't just a case anymore. He was a story of courage, a symbol of quiet strength. Finally, the head surgeon emerged and removed his mask. "It went well," he said. Dr. Lewis exhaled deeply, a smile breaking across his face. Thank God. Dare was still asleep, but already, a miracle had begun. Dare woke slowly. His eyelids felt heavy, bandaged and tender. But there was no pain, just a dull pressure around his eyes. The room was dim, and a nurse sat by his side, checking his vitals with a gentle touch. "You're awake," she whispered with a smile. "You did great." He wanted to speak, but his throat was dry. Instead, he gave a faint nod and looked around. The world still seemed a little blurry, but something inside him felt different. Lighter. Like a weight he had carried his whole life was no longer there. Dr. Lewis entered the room not long after, his face glowing with quiet joy. "Welcome back, champ," he said, pulling a chair close. "You've been asleep for a while." The surgery was a success. Dare blinked slowly. How do I look?" Dr. Lewis chuckled softly. "You'll see for yourself soon." The swelling will go down in a few days. But trust me, you're going to be amazed. And he was. A week later, the bandages came off. Dare sat in front of a mirror, heart racing as a nurse unwrapped the last strip. His reflection slowly came into focus. He gasped. For a moment, he couldn't believe it was him. The large, bulging eyes had been replaced by balanced, gentle features. His face looked normal, human, like he belonged. Tears rolled down his cheeks, not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time in his life, he saw himself without shame. He didn't look like a mistake anymore. He looked like a boy with a future. Is this really me? He asked in a trembling voice. Dr. Lewis nodded. It's still you, Dare. But now the world can finally see what your mother always saw. Dare touched his face gently, smiling through tears. For the first time ever, he saw himself and didn't look away. When Dare returned to the village 2 months later, the sky was clear, the air warm, and everything seemed different. Even the trees felt like they stood taller. He stepped out of the white SUV beside Dr. Lewis, wearing clean jeans and a fitted shirt that made him feel confident. His hair was trimmed, his posture stronger, and most of all, his eyes, once the source of mockery, were now ordinary, even striking. The village was not ready. People who once whispered now stared in stunned silence. The market women paused mid-sale, blinking in disbelief. Children stood frozen, unsure if they were dreaming. Teachers who used to look past him now looked again and again. Even the headmistress came out, her hands over her mouth in shock. Is that Dare? One of the pupils whispered. He's handsome, another muttered. Mama Tinu ran from the house, not minding her wrapper trailing behind her. She held him tightly, crying as though he'd returned from a battlefield. You are my son, she sobbed. My beautiful, brave boy. That Monday, Dare returned to school. But this time, he wasn't hiding under a tree. He walked through the school gate with his head held high. Students stared, but no one laughed. Some of the boys who once mocked him now tried to shake his hand. The girls giggled behind books, blushing as they waved. He walked into his classroom and sat confidently at the front. When the teacher entered and paused mid-sentence at the sight of him, Dare stood and said gently, Good morning, Ma. There was no bitterness in his voice, only quiet strength. Dr. Lewis eventually returned to the city, but not before saying, The world may change how it sees you, Dare, but never forget who you are. From that day on, Dare became more than just the boy with big eyes. He became a symbol of resilience, a living miracle. And this time, when people looked at him, they saw more than just a face. They saw a future. If this story inspired you, please don't leave without showing love. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. Share with someone who needs hope today. Tap the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story like Dare's. Thank you for watching. Stay inspired. Stay strong.